Good morning, everyone, or afternoon or evening, depending on where you are in the world. It is morning where I am still. Um, Welcome to the third annual workshop on immersive sickness prevention. My name is Evan Suma Rosenberg from the University of Minnesota. And on behalf of both myself and my co-organizer, Victoria Interrante, we'd like to welcome you to the workshop. Um, Someone said that this is echoing. Is that true? Is my mic echoing?
I think someone speaker is turned on.
Okay. If everyone could mute their microphone who is not the speaker, that would be ideal. Okay. If there's still an echo, let me know and we'll try and fix it. But I see everyone should be muted now. Okay. All right. So we have divided the workshop program this year. It's Reverb and Verbella. Good. Someone pointed out in Discord. We have divided the workshop into two paper sessions and a keynote. The first paper session will take place for the next hour. We're gonna have plenty of time for questions in between papers. So we have a good amount of time. We're not going to be too up to time constraints. All the paper speakers have prepared a pre-recorded video of their talk, which we will stream with captions for accessibility. And then all the speakers will be present afterwards for discussion live on Zoom. If you have questions during, please type them out at any point in time in either, preferably in the Discord channel. If you haven't found the Discord channel for the workshop, it's scroll all the way down in your list of channels. If you don't have a list of channels yet, apparently you have to register for the registration desk to get added. But then you scroll all the way down to where the workshops are and you'll find our Discord channel. If you can't find that and you want to ask in the Zoom chat, I'll try to monitor that as well. And then after, when we get to the Q&A, Vicky and I will ask the questions aloud for the speakers. Again, please feel free to bring as many questions as you can think of because we're going to have plenty of time for discussion. We'll then have a break and then we'll have a second paper session starting at 6:15 p.m. Lisbon time. And then after that, we will have, sorry about the Google Slides grading that out, a keynote talk from Stephen Palmisano from the University of Wollongong about why we get sick during HMD-based virtual reality. Before we get started, this is my last slide before we actually get to the talks. We'd like to give a huge thank you to the program committee of reviewers who all reviewed all these papers in basically just a week. So with a very, very short turnaround time. All papers were peer reviewed by at least two expert reviewers. So thanks very much for all of you who helped with the peer review process. And with that, just a quick reminder, please feel free to ask your questions in Zoom or Discord, preferably Discord, and we will pass those along to the speakers when we get to the Q&A. All right, with that, that's all from me. We're going to go straight into the first talk now, which is from Stephen Gilbert from Iowa State University, entitled Individual Differences and Task Attention in Cyber Sickness, a call for standardized approach to data sharing.
Hi, I'm Stephen Gilbert. Today I'm going to talk to you about two things. One is individual differences and task attention and how those are research areas that need more attention generally. And the second is a call for a standardized approach so we can better share data and research results. Let's dig in. What affects somebody's cyber sickness? Well, we mostly agree that the stimulus is very important. How much optic flow does it have? Are you in control? Are you not in control? It can be affected by the hardware and the software, right? Both of these affect things. So the stimulus is a key thing. But what fewer people think about are the individual differences that come in. What are the traits and states of an individual that affect their cyber sickness? Traits are longer term things like just age and gender that you can't typically change as much or change very slowly. Also, video game experience might be one. And states are things that are shorter term, like did you have breakfast this morning, or do you have the flu right now and you're very congested? Those could affect cyber sickness as well. If we think about a timeline of experiencing something in cyber sickness, then there's this initial sensitivity that people vary on a lot. That would be a trait. Also, people vary on whether they can adapt to a stimulus like this in real time. And they vary on how quickly they recover. Do they recover very quickly, or does it take hours or even days to feel right again? And then if I give you the stimulus over and over again, do you habituate or do you tend not to? Those are some of the individual traits we can talk about. And there are also states that I mentioned earlier that would be more temporary. So both of this and the stimulus affect cyber sickness. And if I'm putting stimulus perception up here, not just stimulus, because really, these individual traits and states affect my perception of the stimulus itself. So the software and hardware that you put in front of somebody is going to affect that person differently than the other people, depending on what the person's bringing. So generally, these individual differences need more research, and that can be difficult because you need a lot of participants, and also you need more complex statistics like structure equation modeling, mixed models, that sort of thing. But it's very important that we do it because we need to be able to predict what's going to make people sick based on who they are and what their experiences are, and predict whether they can adapt to these experiences. Now, let's look at the task also. How does the task you're doing or the attention you're having to devote to that task affect you? Let's say I had a task that you were going to go through an experience that might induce cyber sickness, like some sort of 360-degree airplane situation. And while you're going through that, I'm asking you to count backwards by 700 by 13s. That's a typical sort of cognitive loading task. It doesn't require any visual or auditory stimulus. I'm just going to load up your memory. Or maybe I ask you to play Beat Saber, right? And why is it that that task doesn't make people sick very much, even though there's a lot of optic flow, right? Is it something about the attention of the task that's keeping you from being sick? What if I ask you a navigational cognition, like remembering a path, or auditory cognition, like counting accordion riffs, or social cognition, sort of collaboration, negotiating a deal? So I'm really interested in how your attention, especially non-visual attention, might affect cyber sickness. A lot of people call it VIMS, visually induced motion sickness. But what if these non-visual attention loads could affect your cyber sickness? That would be really interesting. So I can put in modality here and cognitive load and say, well, yeah, these are going to also be affected by these other things, right? My attention and task, of course, is affected by the stimulus, but it's also affected by my individual states and traits. How much working memory am I bringing to this task, to my attentional load? So we need more research about that task as well. When you review the research papers, a lot of people talk about the different stimulus and hardware and software, but not as much about the task. In Rebinich and Owen's paper recently, they also asked the question, what factors affect cyber sickness? And they have a variety of similar factors. They break out hardware and software very nicely. And some of these states or the traits are here, not as many states, but that's fine. And I could imagine getting together with them and others and trying to carve out a list of factors that we think as a cyber sickness community are most important to focus on. All right, let's look at the number 2, the call. What do I mean by standardized approach? My participants are so sick, well, mine are sicker. All right. So what does that mean? Whenever you design a cyber sickness study, you have to answer some questions when you design your study. Whom are you going to recruit? What are their states and traits? What are you going to do to make them sick? What are they going to do? Are they going to have a task or not? Are you going to measure it? How are you going to measure it? How many times are they doing this and for how long? All of these things are questions you have to answer in your study design. Well, what if there were preset options for these? And I'm not saying there would be options you would be forced to use, but what if there were some options that were available to use, and then you could also add your own? Well, that would make it really interesting, because then we could have what I'm proposing is a cyber sickness a la carte study kit. You could download this cyber sickness kit, and as a community of researchers, we could share IRB templates to tell the IRB how you're not going to hurt people even though they're sick, surveys to use, open source virtual environments to share, mitigation techniques, standardized measurement tools, R scripts for data analysis. There's some intelligence that has to go into those R scripts so you handle the dependencies between trials, right, as people get sicker, and research reporting guidelines. These would all enable us to be a more coherent sort of cyber sickness research organization or as a discipline, right? Internationally, we could be focusing on this and using some of the same tools and speed up our results. I want to go deeper on research reporting guidelines because if you're not from the medical research world, you might not have run across these. If you are doing medical research, then you will have probably become familiar with the Equator Network and its 457 different reporting guidelines. Now, the most, the leading guidelines are up here, like Consort, Strobe, and Prisma. And what do I mean reporting guideline? Let's imagine I click on Consort, and it's basically a checklist that says things like, hey, did you identify that it was a randomized trial in the title of your article? And these checklists are something you submit alongside your article when you submit to a journal. So the journal might say, hey, you can only submit to our journal if you use Consort, or you can only submit to our journal if you use Prisma, one of these other guidelines. And if you're using Consort, you fill out the guidelines and it's like, did your abstract mention trial design methods, results, conclusions? Yes, it did. What were your hypotheses? Oh, I stated them. Good. Check that box. What was my trial design? And what was my allocation ratio? Okay, I put that in. So this sounds like extra work, but it is an amazing facilitator of synthesis of multiple research articles across studies. So if I want to do a systematic review and only pull out articles that have certain trial designs or only pull out articles that have used certain stimuli, these checklists make that super easy. And so I don't miss out on articles, or I don't blend in articles in a meta-analysis that don't go together. Also, it makes it easier to review, right? So if you're a reviewer for one of these journals, you get this Consort guideline and you can quickly skim it and realize, oh, this is this sort of article. I like this, I understand this, and I really care about eligibility criteria, so I'm going to dive into that section of the article. So I would recommend that as a community, we come up with a cyber sickness reporting guideline, and then you could have journals say, hey, if you're reporting on cyber sickness, be sure to report these things. Okay, so then if you do your study, maybe I'm trying to color code based on some of these menu options that you choose, like what is your population? Video gamers, older adults, undergrads. Which measurement of cyber sickness did you use? SSQ, VRSQ, CSQ, right? Which stimulus did you use to make people sick? Corn maze, 360 flight, which maybe you did a mitigation, maybe you did a task, maybe you did a certain survey. So you can imagine now that these are a little bit like delicatessen sandwiches with different meats or cheeses or vegetables, and you can swap them out. And then we can get to being researchers and we're talking and somebody says, hey, you should use older adults in my corn maze protocol. Let's just swap the two population samples. Or, well, yeah, or you could use my 360 flight with your gamers. So you've already got a gamer protocol. Great, switch in the 360 flight. And somebody might say, hey, I'm really interested in calibrating CSQ and SSQ. And I've got CSQ on corn maze. You've got SSQ around corn maze. Let's share our data and compare, right? So if we had a little bit more systematicity, and I'm not trying to constrain people, but just, here are some options. Let's give people options to choose. We've got a ripe set of studies available to us and easy comparison when we start sharing data. We can look across studies. So I hope that's useful to you. I've gotten 2 messages across, open to questions, looking forward to collaborate. And here's a little advertisement for the corn maze that we have built. It's open source. You can make people sick with it. Most people want to stop in about 3 minutes. We often give people about 10 minutes to go through it. And we've built it in Unity so you can adjust a lot of the parameters. And we're working on 3D version of the corn. It's almost out and we'll release that soon. It'll be interesting to compare the 2D image maps on the walls with 3D corn. And we've published a couple papers using this corn maze. So I hope that's interesting. I look forward to talking, exchanging ideas. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Stephen, for the talk. And now please feel free to enter some questions into Discord. While we're waiting for questions to pop up, I'll get that started. The research reporting guidelines that you talked about were very interesting, and perhaps that seems to me even bigger than just cyber sickness research, right? Like as a VR as a field with our, the way that we do user studies is often like, sometimes it's a bit of the Wild West. And so I'm just wondering if you have any thoughts more generally about, as a field, should we be trying to move towards this? And then how would we perhaps, from a practical level, start implementing something like this? Because someone has to coordinate this at a centralized level.
Right. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, so great question. When I first did a collaborative project with a colleague in pathology, and she introduced me to this world of these research reporting guidelines, I was a little bit astounded that there were so many of them and that the journals are so tied to them. But then she showed me the results that come where you can merge data, you can review data much more effectively. And the way these reporting guidelines tend to come to pass is that somebody will publish it as an article. So there will be, there's a systematic reviews journal, and somebody will say, hey, I've got a guideline that's really good for maybe COVID vaccine studies, or I've got a guideline that's really good for when you are working in studies where you can't control the population or something like this. So that's how these different guidelines come about. So it could be that if several of us are interested, we could try to draft an article with such guidelines. And then there are tools out there that sometimes help you enter the guidelines to make it not so painful to tick and tie, parts of your article. Because when you have a good guideline that's published, it might look something like, what's your study design? And you're like, oh, I have a parallel within subjects design. And then it'll say, where in the article do you say that? Or copy paste the sentence of your article into the guideline that proves that that's your answer. And there are some tools out there now that make that really easy to basically answer the checklist with a PDF. You go through your PDF of your article and highlight all the answers, and it pops them into the boxes. Yeah, but more broader, I think it would be useful. It would help with the reproducibility crisis in psychology. It would help systematize things all around. I'm a big fan.
Yeah, no, it's a very interesting idea. I think the main challenge is just how to moving forward to practically implementing it. So we have a question in Discord from Tong Yu Ni. Who is responsible for creating the guidelines in medical research, and do we have counterparts in VR research?
Yeah, I think that's like I said, different people will come up and just sort of publish these guidelines, and what I don't fully understand, and maybe we can get with our medical colleagues to figure this out, is how you build, you build up inertia behind something like this. Like, who determines that? We in our own field, are we calling it VIMS? Are we calling it cyber sickness? Are we calling it simulator? Then it's like, well, what do all these mean? And we have a lot of articles where everybody's like, hey, I'm publishing, and by the way, let me lay out all my terms. I have to spend a page doing that. So in our own field, we're sort of struggling with some of the terminology, and it's hard to know who sort of buys in. I think if there were a leading journal, you get Frontiers, right? They operate pretty fast. Maybe you get Frontiers in VR and a special topic on cyber sickness, and they're like, yeah, well, here's some guidelines to follow. And if it catches on, maybe that's the way to go.
Great. Christina Vasilevska says, lovely talk. Guidelines would really help the students that are early in their PhD. So I think that's a comment, positive comment. I see a couple people typing still in Discord. If you want to finish your thought, so we have we have another question. Interesting talk, thank you. Did you consider developing guidelines for objective measures of VR sickness?
Yeah, I'm working with a couple grad students that are working on measures of VR sickness. Everybody wants an objective measure, so I know if I'm, how sick am I on a scale of 1 to 10, and is it the same sickness as you have? And that's been a struggle for 20 years. So I think the guidelines is a little bit more about research reporting, so it's sort of a different thing. But I agree that it would be great if we could have some objective measure for sickness. I'm not sure if we're going to get there until we, hook up some gadget that combines balance and blood pressure and a bunch of different physiological signals. Maybe we get a little closer.
Alec Moore has a question. With a formulaic system like this, you could potentially propose, distribute, and evaluate new questionnaires among a large number of studies for other researchers to help you validate. Is that something you've given thought to?
Yes, this is exactly the sort of thing I have in mind. I've been on a number of grant proposals that are across multiple universities, and we've tried to combine data from VR studies that involve cyber sickness. And so Wally Boot, for example, down in Florida, has done a number of studies with older adults, and he's like, "Hey, I'm happy to share my data with you, but my study was about whether the older adults can do task X. I wasn't really studying cyber sickness, but I'm happy to give you my data about who got cyber sickness and rates of attrition if you want that." And I'm thinking, wow, okay, if he had done, if we had some more standard thing, then his data would be more valuable to us. And then I talked to Scott Moffat at Georgia Tech and say, "Hey, can you share data about cyber?" Well, yeah, I could, except the goal of my study was a little different. So if we had some common language, perhaps it would be easier to aggregate data and not worry about, um, the intention. And yeah, when you start aggregating data from different studies, statisticians get a little worried. But if you did it right, I think it's possible.
Um, I have one more question. And this is, I think, more targeted about the corn maze that you mentioned. And you talked about the importance of sort of under like the task and task and how that can affect cyber sickness. Um, but one of the things that we found in some of our recent work is that the population, and you've mentioned this before, different populations can affect it as well. And I was wondering, have you used the Unity Corn Maze in any remotely conducted studies from the general population of VR gamers, or has that only been in lab? And the reason I ask is we've been using in some of our not yet published work, we ran a study that used a non-corn maze, but a maze that looks very, very similar. And we ran it in a remote environment. And with like 15 minutes of exposure, we were shocked, like there was extremely low levels of sickness. So it seems like that amongst populations, there's a huge effect here.
Yeah, so one of my grad students is just preparing a study with a remote VR, out on the Slack group with about 3D VR UI. There are a lot of people talking about VR remote studies, and we've done 4 different studies with remote users now, and this is going to be one coming up. And so we're just trying to work through the IRB about how to make people sick in their own homes, and have a safeguard by maybe having a second person nearby. Telling him to stop at the right time, this sort of thing. So we're sort of, if you figured out how to do that with an IRB, I'd love to share. And that's the
Yep.
sort of things we want to share as a community. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, we can definitely share notes on that offline. We have another question from Mohan Zolake. Do you see guidelines and metrics updating over time? How would it influence aggregating data?
That's interesting. In the medical world, I have seen that they, what I mean, I'm only dabbled in this world right through my colleague, but what she's told me is that they'll, instead of having like, here's the consort guideline, and then here's having consort version 2, instead they'll say, we are now accepting consort as well as Prisma, which is perhaps a consort variation. And obviously, if you have standards of any sort, it's nice if you don't change them over time. So you try to write them ahead of time to be as broad as possible.
Okay, we have 2 more questions. So I'm going to say that these last 2 questions that are already entered, I'm going to ask, and then we're going to move on just to make sure we have enough to stay on time. Christina Vasileska asks, do you think we should have some ethical considerations to the guidelines or just address the presentation of the research?
I feel like there could be guidelines for the ethics. That could be a separate question. I was originally just pitching research reporting guidelines so that we have some standard ways to read each other's work. But it would be great to have ethical considerations, especially on these things like Evan and I are talking about how to make people sick in their own homes and whether that's okay. Yep.
Okay. And then last question from Rifatul Islam. Nice talk. I think a standardized approach is really necessary. As a PhD student, I also struggled since different researchers use different approaches while designing their studies. I was wondering if there's any standard approach for what kind of different simulations should be used in a cyber sickness study. Most of the case corn maze or roller coaster simulation, cyber sickness is often severe as compared to simple navigational walk or a car driving simulation.
So to your key question, is there a standard approach? I'm afraid there's not. Really, I mean, it's like, yep, no. I think the key is whether you want to, I feel like the studies break into these 2 halves of the studies where like, we did this thing and made people sick and they just sat there and endured it, versus we gave people a task to do. And while they were doing the task, maybe they got sick or they didn't. So is it task-based or is it not? And Victoria is posting a great paper on last year on this. All right.
Okay, great. I think we should move on to the next paper. Thank you, Stephen, for a great talk. And thanks everyone for all the questions. It was so lovely to have a nice, lively discussion in a workshop like this. Okay, so I'm going to move on to the next speaker. All right, our next speaker is, of course, I had to click something to make it buffer 1 second.
Good morning, everybody.
Okay, our next speaker is Estelle Nicoul, and she'll be presenting a new device to restore sensory congruency in virtual reality and to prevent cyber sickness.
Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to present my work in this symposium. I am Estelle Nicoul, a postdoc in neuroscience working in the south of France. Today I'm going to present a new research project in partnership between the CNRS in Marseille and a small company, Boarding Ring. I'm going to present a new device to restore sensory congruency in virtual reality and to prevent cyber sickness. As motion sickness, cyber sickness is characterized by several vegetative manifestations, dizziness and nausea. It generally occurs during exposure to a moving virtual environment with little or no movement from the user. The effects dissipate when immersion in virtual reality ends, but they can last for several hours. Cyber sickness is mostly considered to originate from a sensory conflict. This conflict is often presented as coming from visual and vestibular information from the inner ear, but somatosensory information is also likely implicated. When a user is immersed in VR, visual information may indicate self-motion, while other sensory inputs, such as vestibular information, indicate that you are sitting or standing still. Moreover, an optical flow can create an illusory sensation of self-motion called vection. Vection may facilitate cyber sickness, and its intensity may be a predictor of cyber sickness onset. Another theory proposes that postural instability favors cyber sickness. Studies showed that individuals with higher postural instability measured before exposure to VR are more sensitive to the visual simulation of self-movement. According to this theory, spontaneous postural instability should predict susceptibility to cyber sickness, and its onset should be preceded by an increase in postural instability. Individual factors may also influence cyber sickness. Some individuals appear naturally more sensitive to motion sickness than others. This may be linked to sex differences. Studies reported that women appear more sensitive to cyber sickness than men. Some found that this may be linked with poorer postural control. However, these results remain controversial. Anxiety may also contribute to cyber sickness. Symptoms of cyber sickness resemble the physiological manifestations of anxiety, and anxiety has been shown to increase the cyber sickness scores obtained using questionnaires. A wide range of solutions has been proposed against cyber sickness. Some of them are software-based. Stable reference frames can be added to the virtual environment. Some use image blurring or field of view reduction. These aim to minimize the conflict between visual and vestibular information. This can be done by reducing vection, which requires a wide field of view. A proposed solution against cyber sickness is therefore to reduce peripheral visual information to prevent it from contributing to visual vestibular integration and conflict. However, these approaches are still debated and some prefer not to use them, arguing that they may impair user experience. Also, these software adaptations are not always compatible with the virtual environments, although efforts are being made to overcome this. In contrast to this approach, we propose to reduce cyber sickness by adding information in the visual peripheral field. In this line, Boarding Ring developed the Cinetic VR. This device gives peripheral visual information congruent with the user's head movements. The cinetic VR restores the congruency of visual information with vestibular, somatosensory, and motor efferent copy signals when the user moves while being immersed in VR. The cinetic VR is an add-on device compatible with several types of head-mounted displays. It consists in 2 displays, an inertial measurement unit, a microcontroller, a power supply system, and a holding device. The 2 systems are placed in the lateral peripheral visual field on the right side of the right eye and the left side of the left eye. They show a grid of dots moving according to the user's head movement and its position relatively to gravity. These visual signals reproduce a movement of the image on the retina during a head motion in the virtual environment. Our project has several objectives. The first one is to test the effect of the cinetic VR on cyber sickness. The second main objective is to test the theories of cyber sickness by manipulating visual vestibular congruency using this device, as well as recording postural activity during cyber sickness onset. Third, we will test the effect of individual traits on cyber sickness and its remediation using the cinetic VR. To do so, we designed 2 experiments with a similar structure. In these experiments, participants will be immersed in VR and exposed to a virtual roller coaster for 10 minutes. Participants will be asked to move their heads in all directions to explore the virtual environment during the roller coaster ride. After the ride ends, they will have to answer questions about visual elements in the scenes they visited. We will have 3 experimental conditions in which the cinetic VR will work in different modes. In the off condition, the device will be switched off. It will therefore not deliver any peripheral visual stimulation. When it will be turned on, dots will appear on both screens, on each side of the participant's head. In the on condition, the cinetic VR will function normally. The dots will move according to the movement of the participant's head to provide peripheral visual information congruent with the head motion. We also developed a sham mode. In this mode, the dots move randomly. This mode aims at controlling potential distracting effects of peripheral visual signals on cyber sickness. Each condition will be presented once in a random order, during 2 sessions that will take place 1 week apart on the same day of the week and at the same hour of the day. Half of the participants will be exposed to the on and off conditions, and the other half will be exposed to the on and sham conditions. We will use different subjective measures. Once at the beginning of the experiments and prior to any exposure to VR, we will make a pre-test measure of cyber sickness using the Simulator Sickness Questionnaire, or SSQ. Although the relevance of the SSQ to measure cyber sickness is a matter of debate, using this questionnaire will allow us to compare our results with other studies. But it will not be a sole measure of cyber sickness. Every 2 minutes during the exposure to the virtual roller coaster, participants will indicate their level of cyber sickness using an 11-point misery scale. Participants will also have to answer yes or no to a forced choice question, are you motion sick? This will give us information on the level of cyber sickness through the 10-minute exposure to the virtual roller coaster. Directly after the exposition to virtual reality, participants will indicate the intensity of vection they felt on a visual analog scale. They will again complete the SSQ to get a post-test score of cyber sickness. Based on the hypothesis of a visual vestibular conflict, providing peripheral visual information congruent with vestibular information should reduce cyber sickness. We expect the cyber sickness scores for the on condition to be significantly lower than the scores for the off and sham condition. In addition to these questionnaire measures, we will use electrophysiological and postural recordings to measure cyber sickness. In a first study, we will measure forehead skin conductance, which reflects the activity of the sweat glands, and skin temperature on the left hand. Skin conductance should increase while skin temperature should decrease during exposure to the virtual roller coasters for all conditions. We expect that the increase in skin conductance and the decrease in temperature will be lower for the on condition compared to the off and sham conditions. In this experiment, participants will be seated during the exposure to the virtual roller coaster. In a second experiment, participants will be standing during the exposure to the virtual roller coaster. We will use posturography to test the predictions of the postural instability theory. According to it, participants with a higher postural instability should be more prone to cyber sickness than stable participants. We should also observe an increase in postural instability during virtual reality exposure, evoking cyber sickness. We make the hypothesis that postural instability would be reduced in the on condition compared to the sham condition. These experiments will help determine whether predictions from the postural instability theory may help to assess the efficiency of interventions against cyber sickness, such as the Cinetic VR. It may also determine whether the Cinetic VR has different effects depending on individual spontaneous postural instability. Finally, we will also test the contribution of several individual traits on cyber sickness. We will test the influence of motion sickness susceptibility on cyber sickness and potential effects of the Cinetic VR. Once at the beginning of the experiment and prior to an exposure to virtual reality, we will assess motion sickness susceptibility using the MSSQ. Motion sickness susceptibility should predict the intensity of cyber sickness in the off and sham conditions. The Cinetic VR may also have a greater influence on cyber sickness for individuals with higher motion sickness susceptibility scores. We will look at sex effects on cyber sickness. We will compare cyber sickness measures as well as motion sickness susceptibility, anxiety scores, and spontaneous postural stability between male and female participants. This may reveal sex effects and their relation to the effect of the Cinetic VR. Symptoms of cyber sickness also resemble physiological manifestations that come with anxiety, which has been shown to increase SSQ scores. A higher level of self-reported anxiety could therefore increase cyber sickness during exposure to the roller coaster, or at least worsen the measurement of these symptoms by the SSQ. Once at the beginning of each experiment, participants will complete the French version of the state trait anxiety inventory. This questionnaire measures anxiety as a personality trait and as an emotional state related to the current situation. Participants' anxiety scores will be correlated with their cyber sickness scores to test for a possible relationship between anxiety and these measures. If no correlation is observed, we will have controlled for the fact that this psychological aspect does not affect the other possible effects observed. If a correlation is observed, we will be able to analyze this relationship between anxiety and cyber sickness and bring new elements to current research on this topic. To sum up, we will test the effect of the Cinetic VR, study the multisensory basis of cyber sickness, test predictions of the postural instability theory, and evaluate the effects of individual traits on cyber sickness. The results of this research will contribute to the advancement of fundamental knowledge on the multisensory mechanism underlying cyber sickness. They will also contribute to testing the Cinetic VR device, an innovative and non-invasive solution to mitigate cyber sickness aimed at professionals and the general public alike. Thank you for your attention.
Okay, we thank you, Estelle, for the presentation. We have her live here on Zoom, and we already have a few questions typed out in Discord, so I'll start going through them. The first question we received was, how do you determine the level of cyber sickness with GSR and finger temperature? That question comes from Yuyang Wang. You're muted, Estelle.
Sorry.
So thank you very much. We will use the GSR and finger temperature during the exposure to the roller coaster to compare it to baseline measures before the exposition to virtual reality. So what we want to do is to see if there are physiological changes during the exposition to VR compared to the state of the system before exposure to VR. And it has been shown that cyber sickness is correlated with changes in GSR and temperature. So we want to see if we can replicate this and if it can or not be used as measures of cyber sickness.
Okay. Next question comes from Ayush Bhargava. Do you think using the term motion sick in the question you ask every 2 minutes could have influenced a participant's sickness level? Why or why not?
That's a good question. I'm not sure about the answer. Also, the final question that we are going to use in French does not necessarily mention the motion sickness, the fact that the sickness is related to motion. So for French participants, it will be a little bit more general than really motion sick. So we will have access to any potential symptoms. I'm not sure if that's answering properly, but...
That's really interesting. Now, is that because in French, the translation, it doesn't include the word motion for that phenomena? Is that...
Not really. It's more like, do you feel sick, or it's more like they will more think about nausea or this kind of dizziness, I guess, than really motion sickness, because we use an expression in French which for motion sickness that is very specific to transports, and we don't want to use this.
That's a super interesting point that I hadn't heard discussed before, that actually in different languages to describe this phenomena could potentially suggest different things to participants. That's really interesting.
Yeah.
Next question we have from Rifatul Islam. He had several questions, but the first one I think was the same question as Ayush, the previous one, so I'll skip that one. Did you already run the studies, or are you planning to? If you're planning to, I have a couple questions. Skipping the first one, do you think skin temperature is often corrupted by the external environment? And the next question is, why not use HR sensors?
Do you think? I'm not sure to understand the question. I'm sorry, but if you think about how the external environment, the real environment, may affect skin temperature, here again we will look at measures during exposure to VR compared to baseline measures, and as the exposition in VR is just 10 minutes, there should not be too much changes in temperature in the room, for example. So this should not affect the measures, and we will again refer the measures to the baseline before exposure to VR just a few minutes ago. So there should not be too much influence of the environment.
Okay, and then the second question was, why not use heart rate sensors?
Well, we had to make choices, and so we did not include them, but yeah, it's just, I would say, just a choice here, but it's an interesting measure, and we're still thinking about to include it or not.
Okay. And there's quite an interesting discussion going on in Discord, so I won't read all of that out. There is one more question. So this will be the last question I'll ask, and then we'll move on to the next speaker. From Karina La Rubio. Could this device be adaptable to different susceptibility scores or / levels of visual comfort, using more distinct cues for those who are more at risk for cyber sickness?
That's a really good question. We are still working on the device, so I guess we can still adapt and maybe find the best parameters to maybe adapt some to the users. But this would need to be the topic of some studies that we have not planned yet.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Estelle, again for the presentation. Let's move on to the next speaker. And you definitely might want to check out the conversation in Discord because there's quite a dialogue going on in there right now.
Yes, thanks.
Okay, so we will move on to the third and final speaker in this session. And this speaker is Colin Groff, and the title is Mitigation of Cyber Sickness in Immersive 360 Videos.
Hi, I'm Colin, and I'd like to welcome you here at the Institute of Computer Graphics in Braunschweig, Germany. Our team is involved in many areas of computer graphic research, such as virtual reality. Of course, in virtual reality, there are a lot of important things to focus about, but today we like to focus on cyber sickness in 360 videos. Today, most people know or have at least heard of the technology of VR. A lot of people use their VR glasses to play games with it because it's really cool. You have this depth, you have this immersion, and it's really not like traditional gaming. But VR has a lot more to offer. Imagine this. You went on a skiing holiday, and instead of the normal camera you always installed on your helmet, used one of the available 360 cameras. And now you're back at home and you want to experience this feeling again, how it was on the slope. And instead of showing it or looking at it on a normal monitor or TV, you can look around in the video. You can feel this immersion again by using VR glasses and these 360 recordings. Unfortunately, many people experience cyber sickness when they stay in VR too long. Cyber sickness can be everything from dizziness over blurred vision up to nausea. And it is caused by a mismatch if what you see doesn't match what you feel with your body. So imagine you have this video we recorded on the slope and you want to experience again, you sit on a chair, and obviously in the videos there are a lot of movements, but they do not match with what you feel with your body in this situation. And this beautiful holiday video will most likely make you sick. But we can do something about this. To fight the problem of cyber sickness, we manipulate the single video frames before we show them to the user in a way that is easy and fast to do. We designed the manipulation so that the user perceives them as little as possible. For this, we use eye tracking beside the movement data of the camera in the scene. So for every point in time, we analyze where does the user look at and then only manipulate the outer regions of his view, so the peripheral area. In particular, we do one of two things. The first one is blurring the outer parts of the view. And the second, fully graying out the outer regions. So we always consider the eye gaze of the user and move the center of the restrictors together with the eye movement. So what we only manipulate are the outer regions of the view where mainly motion is perceived. But cyber sickness is not always perceived at the same degree. If you watch a video where a lot of movement is in, then you get sick faster. So we changed the diameter of the restrictors by the linear accelerations and angular velocities of the movement of the camera in the video. And to capture these linear accelerations and angular velocities, we used the built-in gyroscope of the 360 camera. In our experiment, we showed multiple 360 videos to our participants. In the videos, the camera is moving a lot, and of course, because there are 360 videos, one can look around freely in the video at any time. The videos themselves showed scenes of parkour running and wall climbing with falls up to 5 meters. Therefore, movements in all 3 dimensions are covered. The videos were made by trained athletes, and they wore a helmet with our custom-built camera construction on top where the 360 camera was installed on. Moving camera recordings are used in our experiments because they are well known to get people sick, and especially when the movements in the video are fast. It was our goal to get most of the people sick, especially in the ground truth condition, to have a better comparison when we apply the manipulated scenarios. To measure the level of sickness, we used both questionnaires and the physiological body data of the participants. The participants self-assessed how sick they have become with the SSQ, the Simulator Sickness Questionnaire, that was filled out once before and after the experiment. The physiological body data was collected by a finger clip on the participants' fingers. In particular, we measured the heart rate and electrodermal activity, or short EDA, which is also known as skin conductance. Skin conductance is basically a measure of how wet your fingers are and measures nervous system activation. Additionally, we monitored the eye gaze behavior and blink rate with an eye tracker. For that, we used a consumer-grade head-mounted display with integrated eye tracker. The experiment was performed with 3 sessions per participant, each of the sessions on a different day and with 48 hours in between. The sessions only differed in how the videos were manipulated. So once we showed the participants the original video without any manipulation, then we showed them the video with a blurred peripheral area, and then again we showed them the video with fully grayed out outer regions. Of course, the order of these 3 sessions was random. In the experiments, our participants sat on a chair for the whole time, and they were not allowed to move, except for their head. All video clips together had a length of around 10 minutes, but of course, if participants get sick, they were allowed to quit the experiments as soon as they wanted. In total, we had 19 participants who completed all of the 3 sessions.
Yeah, the parkour video for me was especially uncomfortable, but with the visual techniques, it was considerably better.
As a climber, I can definitely say it makes a huge difference if you're just playing a climbing game on a PC, or if you're actually playing it in VR with the visual methods that were implemented here. So it makes it a lot more realistic.
So let's talk about our findings. Our results show that both visual techniques are effective to mitigate cyber sickness for 360 videos. Aside from that, also the time participants are willing to spend in the virtual environment was increased. So overall, people had a more pleasant experience when watching 360 videos in VR. Furthermore, we found out that the opaque occlusion with a dynamic radius is most efficient to improve the SSQ score and the time people spend in the virtual environment. But also blurring of the outer regions shows a positive effect and is especially interesting if you look how long people spend in the virtual environment. So we can say that the efficiency depends on how much the movements are removed from the peripheral area. If we look at the single subscores of the SSQ, we can see the same trend for all the single subscores compared with the total SSQ score. The ground truth condition has the highest sickness value, while the opaque occlusion achieves the best sickness reduction. Especially nausea and disorientation should be considered if one is designing an application with 360 videos in VR. The results of the body measures mostly confirm the questionnaire results. The ground truth condition has the highest values for most of the time, especially for EDA, while our manipulated scenarios show lower values. The participants' eye gaze behavior did not change between conditions, which means that our visual techniques are unobtrusive and did not distract them. Former research found out that cyber sickness affects women much more than men. So when we analyzed the performance of our methods, we also separated men and women. In our experiments, the women felt more sick, at least for the unmodified ground truth scene. But when we then applied our field of view modifications, the sickness level dropped and is on the same trend for both genders. So the results show two things. First, the techniques are much more efficient for women than they are for men, with a reduction by half of the average SSQ score. And second, the methods open up a way for a more streamlined experience across all genders. So in summary, both visual techniques are effective to mitigate cyber sickness for 360 videos in VR. And especially women can benefit here, as VR is now even more universally accessible for everybody. Thank you so much for watching.
Okay, thanks very much for the presentation.
Thanks.
And Colin, I believe we have you here on Zoom.
Yeah.
We got some comment. First comment in the Discord was, wow, high production values. So nice presentation.
Thanks. Yeah, put some time in that.
We have a question from Rifatul Islam. In addition to measuring SSQ, did you also measure user experience or presence questionnaires? Since you mentioned with the reduction of tech-based techniques, the participants had a pleasant experience.